I'm in love with that song.
I love that song.
I'm in love with that song.
I love that song. I love that song.
I'm in love with that song.
I love that song.
I'm in love with that song.
Heads up, all you Who's down in Whoville. It's time for another edition of the I'm in love with that song podcast. I'm your host, Brad Page, and you're listening here on the Pantheon Podcast Network. Each episode of this show, I pick a favorite song of mine and we explore it together on our quest to understand what goes into making a great song. No musical knowledge is required, just a willingness to listen. Sometimes on this show, we dig into a song that's a familiar classic. Sometimes we tap into a song that's lesser known, but no less great. That's the path we're taking this episode. Today, I'm bringing to the table a song by the band Starbelly. This is a song from their debut album called Lemon Fresh, released in 1998. The name of the song is This Time. Now, usually at this point, I'd give you a little history of the band, kind of set things up, and then we'd dive into the song. But this time, pun intended, we're going to do something a little different because we're going to be joined by Cliff Hillis. Cliff was the guitarist for Starbelly. He played on this album, and he's kind enough to come on the show and tell us about making this record and this song. So let's do it. Let's talk to Cliff Hillis about Starbelly and the song called This Time.
This time is for you. This time is for you.
All right, Cliff Hillis, thanks for joining me on the I'm in love with that song podcast. Let's talk a little bit about Starbelly. First, tell me about who the band is, and how it sort of all came together at the beginning.
Starbelly came about in, I think it was 1996 or 97. It started out as a project that Dennis Schockett and Greg Schroeder, who I knew through their prior band, the Rattlecats from Baltimore, had recorded some songs with Andy Bopp of the band Love Nut and then Miracle Bra. Mm-hmm. And they recorded a few, I call them demos, but really they were recordings. They ended up being on our record. And it was a project and they were putting it together. And then they asked me if I would want to join this band, which became Starbelly. And I did. And it was in the little window of time there when Power Pop, there was this kind of little magical bubble of Power Pop being cool.
Yeah.
And we made our record Lemon Fresh, the first record, and with Andy Bopp, and put it out and had some really great reviews and great reactions. And we toured a little bit and we got a manager, and actually Russell Zeker, who managed Jason Faulkner from Jellyfish, and he shopped it around, and we were pushing and doing our thing, and went to the very first International Pop Overthrow Fest in 1998. And, did a lot of cool stuff. So I was in the band for a handful of years. And then right around 2000, I was playing some other bands, doing my own thing as well. And it got a little crazy. And basically, I left the band and Brian Ewald took my place. And for a number of years, Starbelly was a trio with Brian on guitar. And then somewhere in the last 10 plus years, Dennis and I started writing some songs. And now, when we can, we play as a four-piece as Starbelly. So that's the arc in very general terms.
So Starbelly was initially yourself on guitars, Dennis Schockett on bass, and Greg Schroeder on drums, with you and Dennis kind of splitting the lead vocals, right?
Yep. And we all sang harmonies and such. And basically Dennis and I, co-wrote back and forth. I'd say Dennis is maybe 60%, I was 40%, but we did a lot of he had songs, I had songs, and we wrote songs together.
Where did the name come from?
The name Starbelly came from Greg, the drummer. He had a young son at the time, and they were reading Dr. Seuss books to him, and we were trying to find a name, and he saw Starbelly Sneetches and said, "Hey, what do you think about Starbelly?" And there were a lot of star bands out at that time too, so that's how we became Starbelly.
I always figured it was a Dr. Seuss connection, but it's been confirmed.
It is true.
So how did that first album come about? You said it started, they already had some demos when you joined the band, or?
Yeah, they had been recording a little bit with Andy Bop. And
Andy is a great songwriter on his own.
Oh my God, yeah.
And a great singer and a really great producer, but definitely has a sound. There's a sound across all those Miracle Bra records, and I can hear that too in the Starbelly album as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Very retro, but it totally works. I love it.
Oh yeah, yeah. He was, had this really lo-fi 60s, sensibility that he was going for, which we all loved. And he's a bit of a mad scientist. I'll say that.
I can believe it.
Yep. But it was pretty cool, and I learned a lot. And I learned to unlearn some things of like not overdoing it with miking drums and things. And it all depends on the situation. But
sure. Now Andy has production credits on a chunk of the first album, but you do as well. So were these songs sort of cut at different times?
Yes. There were the initial two songs, which were Rocket Ship and She's So Real. That was like the initial 2-song demo or whatnot. And then I went in and we were recording at Andy's house, and it was pretty wild because it was a room in his house. One of his kids' bedrooms he had converted into his studio. It was very tiny. And so we had recorded some more with Andy, and then over the course of the next however many months or year before we actually put out Lemon Fresh, we had recorded a bunch of demos at my parents' house in our basement. I had a whole setup, but I'd always been doing recording. So we were making glorified demos there as well, and kind of picked our favorites. We had a whole nother, probably 10 more songs that had been recorded at around that time, just things I had and things Dennis had. So that's why there's some was Andy, and then some were recorded by me in my parents' basement.
The record sounds pretty seamless, though.
Oh, I'm glad you think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't hear, sometimes you can definitely hear when different producers or different studios even were used, and I think it sounds pretty seamless across all the tracks.
But I'm glad you think that.
Yeah. So the song that I wanted to talk about specifically is a song called This Time. It's the song that opens the album. This song was written by Dennis, correct?
Correct.
And can you tell me a little bit about how the song was written?
Yeah. So let's see. Well, I remember him playing it for us, and we immediately loved it. It was a 2-minute song. I think when he initially wrote it, it was a little more mellow because later on we had started doing a version of it where we were it was very laid back and then kicked in at the last minute. But Dennis has mentioned more than a couple times, he kind of was copying Marshall Crenshaw a little bit on that song. I think You're My Favorite Waste of Time, which, but I don't hear that. I mean, I hear the melody being similar, but I think it's, the song itself stands as good as any song. But it's one of my favorite Dennis songs. I think he wrote sort of a little bit about his wife at the time. I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah, so there is some personal element in the lyrics. And
yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the track itself. Dennis takes the lead vocals. It sounds like there's quite a bit of compression on his voice, which I think is an Andy Bop signature thing.
Absolutely.
Any stories about that? Yeah,
well, it's a funny thing because that ended up being the first song on the album. And I clearly, as day, I remember Dennis going into the little closet to cut the vocal. I think we did a scratch vocal. We played it live, did a scratch vocal, but then went back and then he re-sang but it's basically mostly one take vocal. But when he went in to re-sing it to get it a little more, focused, and Andy was just cranking the compressors and everything to oblivion. And that was, I was sort of into compression then. And that definitely got me on that path as well. But I just remember it was so cranked. And I love the fact that Dennis just takes a breath. I feel every day. And that's was a great way, I think, to lead off the album.
I fear every day, wasting our time away, and no one knows tears anyway.
And it almost sounds like, some people will be like, oh man, that's, what are you doing? That's too much. But we that was sort of our version of rock and roll. It's like making everything just in your face.
Right. Well, it's incredibly punchy and it's powerful, and this is probably overthinking it, but there's something about this album, which is a very organic record.
Yeah.
Beginning with the very first thing you hear is the human breath.
Yeah.
There's nothing more essential, more organic to us as humans as breathing, right? And that's the first thing you hear is him take that breath.
I'm glad you said that because I think about that too. And I love that. It's like, for me, it's like one of my favorite moments just, of starting an album.
Yeah.
I fear every day, wasting our time away, and no one knows tears anyway, are lacing our eyes with age, and as we go.
That's a great vocal by Dennis Shockett. Now let's listen to what's going on underneath the vocals. This is a fantastic chord progression, constantly moving, propelling the song forward. Now, as they transition the verse into the chorus, the guitar switches from those big chords into playing an arpeggiated part.
This time is for you. Can anyone?
I believe there are 2 guitar tracks panned left and right. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess we doubled the guitar. Yeah, it was just me, Greg, and Dennis, and we cut it at Andy's house, at his makeshift studio, so to speak. And I remember we were in the tiny room. I think we cut the basic tracks live, and Greg's in the corner. I'm sitting right next to Greg playing the rhythm guitar, and Andy had my guitar in the bathroom right across the hall. Mm-hmm. And Dennis would sing in the little closet in the room for isolation. Mm-hmm. So we cut the basic track, and then I just doubled that track and then did the guitar solo. It's actually pretty minimal as far as rock songs go.
This time is for you. Can anyone really remember when?
The first time around, the chorus is abbreviated and goes right into that second verse.
This time is for you. Can anyone really remember when you weren't around? I'm getting on with you every now and then. I hear a sound, these tears roll out, take years from now.
Do you remember were both guitar parts played on the same guitar? Did you use different guitars?
Pretty sure it was the same guitar. I had bought one of Andy's. He had I think an endorsement of sorts with Epiphone, and I bought his spare Epiphone Riviera guitar.
Semi-hollow?
Yeah, semi-hollow. with some from the mid '90s. We're going to get super specific. Rivieras from the '60s had little mini humbuckers, but this had full humbuckers, so it was more like a Gibson 335.
Right.
But I believe that's all I played on it. And same guitar, so it wasn't like getting fancy, like, oh, we'll do a Fender on the side, and
Right. Okay, I was curious about that. And what did you use for an amp? Do you remember?
Yeah, Vox AC30, cranked fairly well, and then for the lead, crank it up a little more.
Yeah. Okay. And do you remember what Dennis played for a bass?
Yep. Dennis had this and he still has it and plays it at many Starbelly shows, a cool 60s Hagstrom bass, which was also kind of like a red Les Paul looking body and sounded so darn good. I forget what amp we had going. It was some tube amp. I'm pretty sure it was a trainer head through some kind of a cabinet.
I love the bass part that Dennis plays during that pre-chorus section.
The drums were maybe 3 tracks, and then we had the bass and the 2 guitar tracks, and then the lead, and then it's just like we go on around a mic to do our. It was reminiscent of what they would do back in the '60s, because we maybe bounced a couple tracks, but not much.
And the basic tracks that was cut beginning to end. There's no edit in there or anything. It's just one.
No. It's just like we probably did a few passes, and then like, okay, that's the good one. Here we go.
Cool.
This time is for you. This time is for you.
And then the backing vocals, is that you and the other 2 guys, or just you, or?
I think Dennis and I did it, and then Greg doubled a part.
Okay.
Yeah, but those were pretty much, we cut those kind of like live. After we got the lead vocal down, we went in the little closet and sang our bits.
Right. The 3 of you around the mic, like old school. Yeah.
I just remember too, with Andy, it was like, go. He would hit the button. It's like, go. And just you go and you play it live, and that helped create a lot of that spirit of just, like a live band in a room.
Yeah. There's a lot of energy on this track and on the whole record. The backing vocals, I believe, they're also panned in stereo.
Yep.
Hard left and hard right.
This time is for you. This time is for you.
And so the solo was played on the Epiphone as well, right? It sounds to me like, and you may not remember, but it sounds to me like there's maybe some sleigh bells that come in the background.
Oh, there are. Yes, you're right. Yes. That was, very much a Beach Boysism, but that's right. We had some sleigh bells that come in behind the solo.
It's for you.
I do recall, because I didn't know Andy very well, and he was quite a presence. Just doing that, I came up with that guitar solo that's on the song, and it did take me a few passes. I was pretty nervous because, I also didn't even know Greg and Dennis that well. I was loving the music, but I was like, man, I got to get this right. And I was kind of used to having my own studio at home. Mm-hmm. So I was pretty nervous. I remember doing that solo, but I was really psyched when, with the end result.
It's a very George Harrison-y kind of Beatle-y kind of thing, I think. Yeah. to me, and like you said, it clocks in at under 2 minutes. This is a perfect song. It doesn't waste any time. There's no fat.
Yeah.
It has everything it needs to have in it and not a dollop more. It's just,
yeah.
right? It's just the right amount of ornamentation, which is minimal, but this song doesn't call for that.
Yeah.
It's so great.
I have fond memories of playing a couple of the first two International Pop Overthrow festivals. They were both in LA. And we started with This Time, and it was just almost like just guitar and vocals very quietly. And then we kick in halfway through. And I just remember this moment of the room. It felt very electric. So it's a very special place in my heart with this song and just the record.
And you were telling me that Dennis Shockett has a solo album coming out. Probably will already be out by the time this show airs. But what can you tell me about Dennis's new record?
Yeah, he's got this lush, wonderful full-length album. It's called Weather Vane that's coming out in, I think, mid-April. And yeah, it's really cool. Dennis, he writes songs all the time. And it's funny because like the last Starbelly record, 4, Dennis would come up to my place and just play me a bunch of things. And it's like, what do you think? And I'm like, we would kind of flesh out the songs that way. But he has such a backlog of songs and they're all good. He decided that rather than lean on like the Starbelly guys and whatnot, that he was going to just make a record. And it's actually some of the folks that play with him. He's got an ELO tribute band that plays around regionally called Atomic Light Orchestra. So he used some of the folks from that band. And some of the songs are definitely have a little bit of an ELO bent to them.
Cool.
And just some various guys that he knows in the area, really great musicians. He kind of wanted it to be like, this is my voice doing my thing. And then Brian from Starbelly did play a couple solos because he's just so damn good. But I've heard the record and it's amazing, beautiful, lush songs. So that will be coming out mid-April. And I'm sure Dennis is going to be doing some solo shows, solo band shows, and I will probably incorporate some of those songs into the Starbelly set, I would think.
Very cool. And you came out with a new album of your own called Be the Now, which was out in February 2023, right?
That is correct, yes. 8-song release that mid to late February. I've been having some really good luck with it, getting some AAA radio play, WXPN in Philly, WTMD down in Towson, Maryland, and a number of other stations like that. And I'm really proud of that record. I had some really cool, fun co-writes on there. In recent years, I've been trying to make a point to co-write with songwriters that I dig, that I'll just reach out to people and either they say yes or they say no, but I've been getting pretty lucky here and there. Aaron Lee Tasjan is a great songwriter that I've known for a number of years. We wrote a song together on there called Motel Parking Lot. My friend Kelly Ryan, who's a fantastic songwriter, we've written a few songs together. The lead-off track, Good Morning and Good Night, is a co-write with Kelly. And also Dan Byrne, who I'm a huge fan of. I've done some shows with him and we've written some songs together, and I wrote a song about him because I was kind of just having fun, but I wrote a song called Oh Dan Byrne and asked if he would kind of sing on it. And then he ended up, it was going to be like, hey, take a little verse and I'd be like a guest rapper on a song. It's like, I'm Dan Byrne and da-da-da. And he ended up writing a verse about me. And I was like, oh my goodness. But really proud of that record and been getting some really great responses.
Well, great. I have a copy of your record. I love it.
Thank you.
I definitely will recommend it to anyone who's listening, particularly if you dig this Starbelly track. I think you'll dig Cliff's new record, and I'm really looking forward to Dennis's album when that comes out.
Thank you. And I must give a shout out to my friend Greg Marigus, is sort of my partner in crime for making my solo records. It wouldn't sound the same without him, without his influence.
Great. Well, Cliff, thanks for coming on and talking about this track. Like I said, to me, this is a perfect song. I think Lemon Fresh as an album is a damn near perfect album.
Thank you. Me too.
Yeah, it sets out to do a particular thing, and it does that thing perfectly. I could not recommend this record higher as just a power pop modern classic. It's brilliant.
Oh, thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Cliff. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Brad. Great talking to you.
Same here. Thanks for listening to this edition of the I'm in Love with That Song podcast. Please go find a copy of Starbelly's Lemon Fresh. Every song on that album is great. And I often say on this podcast, support the artist by buying their music. And that is especially true for independent artists like the guys in Starbelly. As music lovers, we need to support artists like this. As we talked about during the show, both Cliff Hillis and Dennis Shockett have new solo albums out. Cliff's album is called Be the Now, and Dennis's album is Weather Vane. Go buy the CDs or the MP3s and support these great independent artists. And you can support this show by posting a review wherever it is that you listen to the show and by telling a friend about the podcast. If you get just one person to listen to this show, you've done a huge favor for us. So thanks in advance. New episodes of this podcast can be heard right here on the Pantheon Podcast Network on the 1st and the 15th of every month. So I'll meet you back here in about 2 weeks with a brandy new show. Until then, thanks for listening to this episode on This Time by Starbelly.
I feel